Welcome to We Are Montgomery Township, the podcast where we keep you informed and engaged about what's happening in Montgomery Township in Montgomery County. Today's episode is an emergency services panel with Montgomery Township Police Department Chief J. Scott Bendig, Fire Department Montgomery Township Chief Bill Wiegman, VMSC Emergency Medical Services Chief Shane Wheeler, and Montgomery Township Manager Carolyn McCreary.
So welcome back to the podcast from Montgomery Township. I'm Carolyn McCreary, the Township Manager. With me today, I have Scott Bendig, Montgomery Township Chief of Police, Bill Wiegman, Montgomery Township Fire Chief, and Shane Wheeler, VMSC Executive Director of Operations.
Chief Executive
Officer. Take your pick. So we're going to talk today about emergency services. This for us is probably our third or fourth time that we've talked about this so far this year to individual groups ranging from the Chamber of Commerce to the State Managers Association to the County Managers Association. So I want to start with you, Chief Bendig. What are some of the main challenges that you're currently facing with the department?
I would say the biggest challenge we're facing is recruiting new police officers to not only our department, but the profession as a whole throughout the continental United States. We are struggling with, I think the best way to look at it is we've made some mistakes as a profession, and I think that we are paying the price right now that not many people look at law enforcement as a viable path for a career. So we have to do, we have our work cut out for us, to say the least.
So somebody told me that they think this is cyclical for law enforcement, that after Rodney King happened, we saw a drop off in people interested in being in law enforcement. Then we had 9/11, and obviously we saw a surge in people applying to serve in the military as well as being first responders, police and fire. Then we had 2020, we had the George Floyd tragedy out in Minnesota. We had social unrest as a result of it, and now we're seeing a decline again. Do you think it's cyclical, or is this different?
I do think it's cyclical. I think one of the issues that, I've been here long enough that I was a police officer in this township when we had Rodney King, and we saw the same general trend then. But I think nowadays with social media has really changed things a lot. So people have the opportunity, ability to see a lot more things. So I would say collectively, attitudes were changed across the Great Divide, across different different generations. And I think now more so than ever, it's going to take some time, but I think we will be able to overcome this at some point in time. But it's not going to be easy, to say the least.
Chief Wiegman, so obviously Montgomery Township is unique in that we have a hybrid fire department. We are serviced by career as well as volunteers. So what are the main challenges that you're facing within your organization?
I think the recruitment and retention of volunteers is a significant challenge for our department. Just in general, volunteerism with fire departments is down across the country like police. I think there's been a 70% decrease in volunteer firefighters in Pennsylvania since the 1970s and 80s. Part of that is that culturally, even when I was growing up as a volunteer in Lower Bucks, the firehouse was the cultural center of the community. Everybody went to the firehouse for the bingos and the chicken barbecue dinners, and it was either your faith-based community or the firehouse, and those were your connections, and those were the ways that you had relationships. And I think nowadays, as those things have changed and people find relationships through social media and the internet, that sense of close community connection has really declined. And for us, it's hard going into that battleground where people don't feel associated to their township or their municipality. They feel they're associated with whatever group or interest that they've kind of attached themselves to. So, we are out there recruiting volunteers. It's a little bit harder in Montgomery Township to recruit those blue collar workers as volunteer firefighters because of the demographics of the township that we reside. When we do get volunteers, we get young kids and they come with us without many life skills. So not only are we working with them on how to be firefighters, but also how to manage calendars, how to show up for things on time, how to be dressed appropriate. and it's hard when you're in the business of solving everybody's problems, right? When you don't know who to call, you call the fire department, and you're hoping that the fire department shows up and they know what to do, whether it's plumbing or electric or whatever. The smell, something smells in my house, I call the fire department, right? So it's kind of we're placing people into an environment that they might not be trained as well as they could be. And I think, after 9/11, like you said, there was that sense of patriotism, and I'm going to go forward and I'm going to serve my community, and no cost is too much. And then I look at the backward swing of COVID, and I see how that impacted volunteers, where, well, if I go out and I volunteer and I get sick and I bring the virus home to my family, and a loved one, an elderly relative passes away because I brought COVID from my volunteer activities. And I think that placed a lot of people in perspective on, okay, I do want to volunteer, but I don't want to volunteer my time in an occupation where I could get hurt.
So you said the 1970s is when we started seeing a decline. And I've been a municipal manager since 2008, and I've been at numerous seminars, conferences where they've been talking about the decline in volunteerism. You mentioned COVID. I hadn't even thought of that, but one of the things that I'm starting to hear about too is housing affordability for first responders. That's become sort of a rallying cry and another leg of why we need affordable housing in various communities. Has it impacted us with our volunteers?
Yes. We lose several good volunteers every year to affordable housing. We have a lot of young people who join as high school or college-age kids who come in. We put them through the fire academy, which is 200 hours of training, and they go off to college or they go off to the workforce, and they're certified firefighter 1, national certified firefighters, and they come back to Montgomeryville to start their lives, and they can't afford to live in town. So we have a hard time, and there has been rallying cries to, a municipality gives money for a down payment, but the money for a down payment in Montgomeryville is a lot of money. It would probably put the FDMT out of business. Family legacy dying off and unaffordable housing are the two major crutches that we fight at Montgomery Township. We don't have a lot of legacy members. Our department's only really 22, 23 years old, but even those members who have had children since the department was founded, their children aren't involved. We try to get them involved, but I don't know. They move off and they do their own thing, and now the kids that we want to stay involved, we can't. They're all moving to Upper Bucks, Upper Montgomery County. I always say we're training Percy's firefighters for them because that's where they all seem to be moving to. But yeah, affordable housing is a real problem here.
Another thing I learned going back when I first started hearing about the decline in volunteerism is there was a time where people lived in the community that they worked in. So the factories, even people in offices were local, and now they're scattered. Is that what you're seeing even in, is that why we have daytime coverage now with career firefighters?
I think, a couple reasons. The first being that our call volume is up so much. We respond to almost 1,000 calls a year for Montgomery Township, which is a lot for 11 square miles and 26,000 people. But how that works is that if you're a business and you allowed your employees to leave to go to be a volunteer firefighter during the day, now you're losing production. So if you're a business that doesn't have a real sense of community in Montgomery Township, plus, you're running 9 or 10 calls a day, you're losing productivity on your business end. So you're starting to see a hit on your bottom line. And then for the volunteers on the weekend, if we have 1 call a weekend, it's great. But if we have 10 calls a weekend, it's that work-life balance of now you're away from your family. Each call at the minimum is an hour, right? No matter how we put it. At a minimum, if it's a fire alarm, a minimum it's an hour. By the time you get to the firehouse, you go to the call, you come back, you put your name in the book to get your point. You talk to your the team, and then you go back home. It's an hour. So 1 call is fine, but 10 calls on a weekend, we start to struggle seeing people turn out. But I think, that sense where businesses used to allow their employees to leave during the day. So, I remember when in high school, and I went to Catholic school, but at high school, if there was a big enough fire lower south, I could go down and they would let me leave. or Neshaminy School District, the school district I grew up at, they would come over the PA and say, all volunteer firefighters for Parkland Fire Company, you have a call. And you would get up and be able to leave school to go to these calls. I mean, that doesn't happen anymore. So you lose those daytime responders.
So Chief Wheeler, you're uniquely positioned. You're new to Pennsylvania, relatively speaking. You're new to VMSC, just a short amount of time. So what are the challenges that you're facing?
Well, similarly, obviously, we're better than most, but recruiting EMTs, paramedics, advanced EMTs, all levels of staff, it's a very competitive market to be in. Particularly, we mentioned COVID, really when we started seeing the real impact to staffing of emergency medical technicians and paramedics. Obviously, the pandemic put EMTs and paramedics in the front line. A lot of paramedics and EMTs, got sick. Some of them died, and it really impacted and changed the trajectory of people entering into the workforce from that point. As well, the wages for EMTs and paramedics have been slow to rise to meet the inflation and the economy. So it's just difficult to get people to want to, well, why would I want to be an EMT, or why would I go to school for 2 years, get my paramedic certification and make, $50,000 a year as a paramedic when I can go to school and be a nurse at the same time and make $75,000 a year. So it's just, it's a challenge for us as well to recruit and maintain those folks. Retention is huge, plus the complexity of the job. We're seeing increases in violence towards first responders, EMTs particularly. Behavioral crisis emergencies are on the rise. Drug abuse, violence. It's just really a tough place to be right now. And I tell everybody that as the fire department is kind of the catch-all for all hazards kind of responses, EMS becomes the catch-all for all medical and social kind of incidents that happen in communities. Well, I don't know, let's call an ambulance. Maybe they'll know what to do with this person. So, I think we face those same challenges that our peers in law enforcement and the fire service have, just a different side of that. So I think that's probably one of the biggest that impact our industry. Like I said, we're a little better off. Our attrition rate's fairly low at about 3%. But certainly, the selection process, early in my career, when you would put out ads for people and so forth, you would get lots of applications. Today, those numbers, again, we're better than some, but, we're still having to kind of sort through and, is that person really qualified? And, and sometimes having to bring people in, as we just brought a paramedic in from Texas, and we hired a paramedic from Florida that we relocated to the area. So we have to kind of cast the net a little wider to bring in the personnel.
So along those lines, what's your current census as far as your employees, just for people who don't know? So obviously, I feel like the EMS is always sort of, I feel like, of the three-legged stool, it's the one that's not known the most.
It's the wobbly one's the shortest leg. So right now, currently, we have about 250 staff. We have a few volunteers that still kind of come out, help us out with football games and various events. But the volunteer side of EMS has really just collapsed. It's once the backbone of emergency medical services across the Commonwealth particularly prided itself as being a really volunteer force. And subsequently, through the years, the increase in training, the greater demand by the public for those services, it just kind of dwindled away, right? And competing interests with fire departments and others. So very few systems are entirely volunteer anymore, and most systems are augmented by just a handful of EMTs or even fewer paramedics who actually volunteer their time.
And can you, for everybody listening who isn't familiar, how big a service area are you covering right now?
So we service, 4 counties, essentially, from Montgomery County, of course. We're servicing some of Bucks County, Monroe County, and we service Philadelphia.
And how many stations do you have right now?
got me on the spot. I believe total we have 9 stations.
Okay. Bill, same thing. How many volunteers do we currently have who you would consider active volunteers, and how many career staff?
So we have about 40 active volunteers. Some of those are fire police officers. So we have a split between firefighters and fire police officers. And then career staff, we have an assistant chief, a captain, 4 firefighters, and then 14 part-time firefighters.
Scott, I know we're fortunate. We have a robust department with various duties in there. Can you elaborate a little bit, the number of sworn officers and their various roles?
So right now we have 38 sworn officers. We are, again, in a hiring process to add another officer that's been allotted to our department. We have 9 non-sworn personnel that work in our organization as well. As we speak now, we have a chief of police, we have 2 lieutenants, and we currently have 6 sergeants. And the sergeants are responsible for overseeing work groups that are actually on the street, detective division as well. And we have another sergeant that actually is responsible for what's called professional standards, which encompasses training as well as accreditation and things of that nature. So again, we are, as everyone else is alluding to, we are working through the recruiting issues, but we are at this point in time right now, we are short 1 officer. So it's definitely been a challenge here.
Can you touch base a little bit on accreditation?
So yes, in 2004, our department became accredited through the Pennsylvania Chiefs of Police Association accreditation program. It's more or less a series of benchmarks or standards that each department is required to have policies and procedures that cover those particular law enforcement related issues. And what our department is required to do is actually show proofs of our department properly executing those policies and procedures related to those particular topics. And then what will happen every 4 years, we'll have an assessor group come into the department, and then we'll look at each of our, what do they call them, proofs for each of the categories that we're required to fulfill for each of those years, those past 4 years. And as long as there's no issues or concerns, our department would become accredited. We've been fortunate enough, so the reaccreditation process is every 4 years. So in 2020, we were accredited for what would have been, I believe, the 5th time, which made us eligible to become what's called a premier agency. Well, what that means basically is we've shown a consistent, long-standing effort to maintain our accreditation in the department. And what that allows us to do is just show that we're, again, trying to reach certain benchmarks, maintain a level of excellence within our organization. So it's difficult, but I truly believe that the officers carry it as a badge of honor for the organization and themselves, because again, it's not something that you see a lot of departments doing. We're fortunate enough that we see the departments that do actually are accredited or do participate in the program. Most of them are in the southeastern Pennsylvania area, and which is it's a credit to not only our organization but the law enforcement agencies in our area and our partners out there.
So obviously, the officers take pride in the fact that we are a premier agency. We've talked at different times about this. Do you still believe that police officers serve as a touch point in their interactions, for almost like as an ambassador for the profession as well as the township?
I do. I mean, the nature of our job is, as I say to some people, we are the parents of society. It's our responsibility when people do something wrong, we have to act as parents and fill our roles and our responsibilities as law enforcement entities. But I do think that, as much as the job that we're sworn to uphold, it can be positive in nature. I mean, you don't have to treat people with disrespect. You treat them with dignity. You treat them as you would wish to be treated. And there are times where, yes, you have to do things you may not want to do as a person, but it's your responsibility, your job. But if you treat people well in every interaction that you have with them, I think slowly but surely people will come to understand that it's nothing more than a job. And when they look back on it, they'll, hopefully say, well, I was treated well. And hopefully, as time goes by, not only in just those interactions, but general interactions, walking into a store or holding a community event, people will start to consider this as a possible, a career avenue at some point in time. And I think the biggest thing I think now is that, in our profession, we have to resign ourselves. I say this to a lot of people. I think we've lost the battle of recruiting right now, but we have to continue to work on winning the war. And that is, building those touch points with people and making it so that the younger people in our world today, when they're making that difficult decision as to what they want to do with their lives, they'll recall maybe a positive interaction with a police officer, and maybe that will be the touch point that they go, wow, maybe that's something that I would consider as a career, and then hopefully we'll build upon that. But I can say that over the past few months, we've had several interactions with some young people in our community, and one example would be our Citizens Academy, where we brought, for the first time ever, we had juniors from our local high school, North Penn area high school, and actually I think one of them came from Solderton, and it was really interesting because I think they really, you saw a flame begin in their eyes, where they really, you could see they're really considering this as possibly, a career avenue, which is great. And it was really nice to see they're very excited about it, and they want to be involved and engaged in all the things that we do. So,
along those lines, Bill, community engagement. We joke internally that everybody loves the firefighters, but how has that helped or enhanced, say, recruitment, or just having a forward-facing interaction with the people that you're serving?
Right. Well, I think community relationships are our currency with our community. I think that most of the time, some people, their first contact they have with a Montgomery Township representative could be the fire department. And we want to make sure that interaction with those first-time customers is a good and a positive interaction. We also are trying different things to get younger people. So we've started an Explorer post. We've partnered with Scouting. We're taking more of a proactive approach. We don't want the mindset where the firefighters just sit around the kitchen table eating and watching TV all day, and then the alarm goes off and they run out to the fire trucks. We want to be more proactive. We want to prevent fires before they happen. We want to be more engaged with community risk reduction activities, which seems like, well, you're not getting the stats you need to show people that you're going on all these calls, and that's not what we want. We want to prevent the calls from happening. So the more we get out there and do CPR trainings, the more we do fire safety seminars for groups or businesses, whatever we can do to build relationships with our community before the emergency is where we're at. We want to have these relationships so that when we show up, they know, okay, they're here, they can help us. We know who we need to talk to. I know this is probably a little far-fetched, but I want the community safety and fire safety to be in our entire community's mind every day of the year, not just Fire Prevention Week or not just Fire Prevention Month. And I think our social media plus all the community activities we engage in, all the business trainings we do, all the residential services we offer have this feeling of a fire safety culture in our community. We spend a lot of time during the day installing smoke alarms, doing different types of training. So I think the more we're out there, like the police department, and the more positive interactions we have, the better it is for both our volunteer and career members.
Shane, I see VMS vehicles at almost every community event I attend. And in the past, I used to think they were there really just in case something happened. It's only been since talking with you, I understand the idea of the engagement as well. How have you affected that with, your staff, and, how does that translate into the events that you're attending then?
Yeah, I think it's important, just like the fire service or law enforcement, having a relationship with the people in your communities is super important to foster trust. We're dealing with people in their most vulnerable states, in their homes, and in crisis situations. So having the first time they see us shouldn't be at that time, right? We should be fostering relationships whether that's through, like you said, community events or CPR classes, or talking to folks about fall prevention. So that public outreach is super important for us, just to foster that relationship of trust. As well, it helps us to showcase our services to the public. Obviously, when the emergency occurs, they trust that we have everything. They're really not paying attention to what the ambulance looks like or what this piece of equipment is doing, or the skillfulness of our teams. Getting the vehicle, the teams out there, get people the opportunity to touch it, see it, understand what might happen in an emergency. I just think it's super important. There's been many cases, like, even a child where we've transported, we'll remember an interaction where we've had an ambulance at a daycare or at an elementary school, and, they're not as afraid of what's going on. They understand what the stethoscope is and those kind of things. So I think it's super important. Beyond that, it also gives us an opportunity to talk about the needs that we have as a service, try to display our subscription campaigns and membership drives and so forth. So it's just super important that we have those public kind of events to kind of support the community and ourselves.
I think until somebody sees the inside of one of those vehicles, I think a lot of times they think of you as transport. I don't think they realize that, an EMS showing up on scene can be the difference between somebody having a positive outcome at a hospital and not. So I think it's critical. Following up on that, you talked a little bit earlier about, the different types of challenges that your EMTs and paramedics are facing. What kind of calls for service are you seeing now? Like, obviously they're very different than the EMT paramedics of the past.
Yeah, certainly. I think, like the fire department, again, that catch-all mentality, we see instances where the ambulance really isn't the appropriate resource. You're utilizing the most expensive mode of medical transportation, an ambulance, and we're taking people to the most expensive component of medical care, to an emergency department. Oftentimes, we're seeing that these patients would be better suited to being able to receive treatment on scene for something, and then a coordinated collaboration with their primary care physician to get them in for an appointment at a clinic or those things. Unfortunately, the regulations, laws, and the manner in which ambulance services are reimbursed for services don't allow us alternative transportation or treatment and release on scene currently. There are some efforts that will allow some of that into the future, but there is a heavy reliance that people aren't going to the doctor regularly. It's not like in the, like when I was growing up, you were going to see your family doctor every time that there was an appointment. In this case, many people don't have a relationship with a physician, all right? And even when they do with a clinic, they're often not even seeing a physician. They're seeing a nurse practitioner, they're seeing a PA. So there's something lost in that relationship. So every time that there's an emergency, they're calling 911 and they're having to get an ambulance for something that clearly could have been taken care of if they had a primary care physician or, another mode of transportation. So certainly seeing lower acuity type call response. But as well, we're seeing a lot of diversity in our responses. We're having increased language barriers with more people from around the globe ending up on our doorsteps, regardless of how that happens. They're here. The social dynamics of dealing with the folks that don't have homes, homeless folks, and of course, obviously the propensity of violence that we're dealing with on a regular basis. So it is really a challenging kind of a dynamic that we deal with, and it's not just that that only happens somewhere else. So I assure you, it is. I'm sure Scott and Chief Wiegman would be able to. It happens here every day. You just don't. We do a good job of taking care of it, so it's not really impacting our communities.
Scott, are you seeing a change in the types of service since you came here, 35 years ago as, a patrol officer?
Yes, this community's changed, and I will say it's changed not so much from it's gotten, worse, better, things of that nature, looking at it that way. The dynamics of the community have changed. When I started, we were the retail mecca of pretty much everything north of us until you got into a different county. So we were the first people to have a Home Depot. We had a mall. We had a Target. So that we were the epicenter of any retail activity. With that came a lot of the crimes that occur in retail environments, frauds, thefts, things of that nature. Most of the time, I mean, drugs have always been something that have always been an issue in every community in our society. They were some of the secondary things that we would see. But more so than anything, it was theft was our biggest issue that we saw when I first began in this, my career in this department. It's changed a lot. Post-COVID, I think now we've seen issues regarding mental health have become prevalent in our community, and as I think both chiefs can say, every community that we serve. So we're seeing a lot more responses to mental health issues. We are seeing, again, some drug issues. The drugs are different, but we still see the drug issues. But the biggest thing I think we're really seeing in our community now more than ever is the mental health concerns that we're seeing, or the mental health issues. And when I say that, it's not just those calls for service, it's how mental health has a nexus in a lot of different calls for service that we're having. Even it just interacting with people in traffic stops. People have, you'll engage them and you could see that there's some mental health issues or concerns that are underlying factors to the interaction. So that's one of the bigger things that we're seeing now. Again, and obviously our community has changed. The mall is not as vibrant, should I say, as it used to be. So we've seen a different dynamic as far as that's concerned. But, the advent of the internet and things that you can do online have also changed things. People have become more and more victimized through internet scams, things of that nature, what people like to call victimless crimes, but they are, nonetheless, they become victims, So we see a lot more of that than we've ever seen before. Even post-COVID, we saw a run on unemployment claims, people using fraudulent information to generate unemployment claims and things of that nature. So computers have become the new tool for crimes, in our community in some respects, but I think across the continental United States.
So, Bill, we talked a little bit about what you think of as the role of the fire department, but what kind of changes have you seen? I mean, you started as volunteer, very young, obviously, and now you're the chief of an operation in, a community that has high expectations for their first responders.
I think we've seen a lot of good changes. I think that we've relied a lot on technology, but I think we've seen a lot of changes in the fire service recently where professionals care about education and training, care about new technology. Fires are a lot different than when I was younger. The new building construction materials, the things that we place into our houses, the way that our houses are built. So the fire service has responded with codes and code enforcement, which I think have really done a good job at mitigating some of the things that we used to see before. But we are, I feel like we're always a little bit behind. Now we're seeing all the lithium-ion battery fires, and we're trying to catch up. But I think we have, as an organization and as a profession, have come a long way into kind of saying, yes, we are volunteers, or we are professionals, we are career, but we're a profession, and we are professionals whether the volunteer shows up or the career firefighter shows up. The all hazards environment has changed a lot. Some of it is self-made. And at Montgomery, I say self-made because we brought in a drone team, and we're doing QRS, quick response service, to assist VMSC. So we've created some niches for ourselves so that we can continue to provide for our customers and our community. Our fire police, we have a lot of fire police officers now to help support our police department. So we've created certain niches that our community needed to kind of, foster that role as an all hazards approach. But I think the thing that we're seeing a regression in is the skills that our firefighters and both volunteer and career are coming to the table with. We used to get firefighters who were veterans or were blue-collar workers who worked in different industries, and now we're getting a lot of young people that are coming straight off the internet. And I remember we were at a training a couple months ago, and the training was a really good hands-on training. And I said to one of the firefighters who was there, I said, "Are you getting a lot out of this training?" And his response was, "Not as much as I would get out of YouTube." And I was like, I couldn't even believe that he said that. I was like, oh man. But that's kind of the mentality we're facing. So I think that people who are committed to the profession will do really well, but those who are just stopping by, if you're not going to jump all in, then there is a concern.
So obviously that's not limited to just Montgomery Township Fire.
No.
So I don't want to talk too long about it, but I want to segue in a little bit. Can you explain the mutual aid process? So if obviously we had a fire in the Chamonix Falls earlier this year.
Right.
It wasn't just Montgomery Township Fire who showed up. How does that work?
It's done differently from every municipality. In Montgomery, we only allot for one of our apparatus responding on any type of call. So if we had a house fire, our assignment on a house fire is 4 engines, 2 ladders, and a RIT, which is a rapid intervention team, which is there to rescue if a firefighter gets in trouble. Only one of those resources comes from Montgomery Township. The rest of those resources, the 3 other engines, the 2 ladders, and the RIT, come from our surrounding municipalities, and they make up our automatic response. So the way that we create our box responses is by 1 per station, meaning that we're not pulling 2 trucks from Colmar, 2 trucks from Hatfield. We're pulling 1 from Colmar, 1 from Hatfield, 1 from Lansdale, whatever it may be. And we're pulling our closest ladders first so that they can get to the front or back of the building where they're needed. But we rely on mutual aid. And the reason that we rely so much on mutual aid is because during the day, at max, there's 7 guys working, so 5 on a truck. But at night, some nights we might get 1 truck out the door. Some nights we might what's called dump the house and get all 4 of our trucks out the door. But we don't know what that's going to be. So some calls, it looks like we have too many people there. And other calls, it looks like we had so many trucks there, but not enough people. Other counties, they rate for how many people they can get out day or night. Montgomery County doesn't do that. So our box assignments are created based on apparatus, not on people. And one of the struggles that all departments have is, what does a qualified firefighter mean? Because in our township, to be an interior qualified firefighter, you need to have your Pro Board National Certified Firefighter 1, NFPA 101. But that might not be the requirements for other municipalities who are providing mutual aid. But that's who they put on the truck is who they put on the truck. And when they come on scene, that's who you're... And that plays hard for accountability as well.
Sure.
But that's how our box assignments work.
Shane, one of the things that talk about the wobbly leg of the stool, you are the only chief here at the table who is not funded by taxes. VMSC, Volunteer Medical Service Corps, lends itself to people thinking it's all volunteers, and we know it's not. We know we have professional paramedics, professional EMTs. Talk a little bit about your financial challenges.
Yeah, and an EMS in general is underfunded. They call it a reimbursement model. So the expectation is that you get reimbursed for something, when in theory we never got the first part to be reimbursed on, right? So so I think the challenge is that we're subject to the insurance world, right? So what they approve, as we've all dealt with at various places in our lives, they won't pay for this prescription medication, but you can get the generic brand, or won't pay this much. It's the same thing with ambulance service. So we have to fight our way to get aid. And oftentimes in an emergency ambulance situation, we think that there's no consideration for that cost of readiness. So you get paid what you get paid for what you transport, not necessarily what you do, but what you actually transport. So if we take 100 911 responses in a community, of that 100, we'll probably only transport about 75 of those people, right? 25 of those people won't want to go. They didn't really call the ambulance in the first place. Why are you here? I've changed my mind, etc. Or we've fixed a problem on the scene, and now they're like, I'm better. I don't want to go to the hospital, right? The remaining 75, 25 of those will be either or underinsured. So we're really looking at only getting reimbursed for half of what we respond on emergency ambulance responses. With that being said, that leaves about anywhere for our organization, it's about a 13% gap from what it costs to deliver the service to what we actually get reimbursed. So that's a real challenge for us. So we try to make up that gap, or many services try to make up that gap by offering subscription programs, membership drives, et cetera, donations, et cetera. And recently, the big push for municipal or local government support to try to make up those gaps. VMSC is blessed. We continue to reduce that cost by creating different revenue lines, whether it's through community paramedicine or event medical services or doing specialty hospital type contracts to support that. But no matter how you slice it, providing emergency ambulance service to communities, you actually lose money in those situations as an organization. So putting a lot more burden on the local governments to try to prop up those systems.
And what makes the reimbursement model different for you as an EMS provider than, say, my hospital or my family doctor?
They face a lot of similar challenges. I think if you look at hospital networks across the country, it is highly unstable, right? We're seeing hospital mergers, sell-offs, buy-offs, layoffs. I think the battle is ongoing between insurance carriers and medical providers. The cost to deliver services and the expectation that everybody has. We talk about everybody wants a police officer in 2 minutes. Everybody wants an ambulance in 1 minute. When I look at some of the rural communities and they're like, well, I want the convenience of this. Well, it's like comparing, there's a reason Walmart doesn't have a facility here, right? Because the population doesn't support it. You're not funding those programs. So hospitals, clinicians, doctors, office, et cetera, everybody is pinched with that insurance situation. I think they're certainly in a much better place with the amount of services that they provide and the, some of the economic power they have as hospital systems that can apply legislatively to make laws that get them paid more promptly.
What does an ambulance cost right now? Just the ambulance, and then what does it cost to outfit it to be able to be an advanced life support vehicle?
Yeah, total all in for an advanced life support vehicle. So I was just looking at the newest heart monitors that we're going to have to upgrade to. They're $65,000 a piece. So to get a fully functional ALS ambulance operational line, realistically, it's $500,000, which is incredible, right? We've all seen over our careers, all three of us, the cost of a vehicle has gone. When I was a fire chief, I was like, man, I would never pay $500,000 for a fire engine, right? And now you can't even get a fire engine for less than $900,000. So we've seen that too. Ambulance prices have just been exorbitant. And then the problem is just the demand for them. It's you put an order in today and it's 2 years from now, I expect to see it, right? So the cost of everything is just really expensive.
Scott, you're positioned differently because one of the things that townships are tasked with under the Pennsylvania Code is public safety. So you don't have to worry in a sense about how you're going to pay for your department. That's my job. But you've also said in recent discussions that we can't throw money at the problem of recruitment. How so?
It's a short-term win. I mean, honestly, I think it's important for you to, if you're running an organization, you have to create a positive environment, a positive culture. The job itself is difficult, and that's part of what's expected when you wear that badge. But when you start to try and come up with kitschy things like a bonus here or a bonus here, it's short-lived. Then all of a sudden, everyone's pivoting, looking for some other possibility or trinket or something where maybe another department's offering more money, things like that nature. So I think it's really important that, in order for you to build an organization and maintain an organization, it's got to be about the culture and your interaction with the people and providing them the equipment that they need. Again, just making it an environment where they want to start their career and hopefully finish their career. I mean, I think we can all speak generationally, gone are the days where people start, their career and they finish their career at one organization. It's changing. And we just have to be mindful and aware that I think collectively you do what you can to make it as positive and as worthwhile to these individuals, these employees. And at some point in time, you realize that maybe they move on to a different pasture or whatever, or a different career. But again, just make the environment as positive and vibrant as you possibly can so that they want to stay and finish their career in the organization or the municipality.
So that being said, how have you changed your recruitment efforts?
So yeah, recruiting has changed a lot since I became a police officer in 1989. When I first started, you put the notice out there and you would have 800 people show up for one job. Now, our last hiring process, we had our internal hiring process. We may have had, I think it was 34 applications. So at this point in time, police departments, and I say not only us, but again, throughout the continental United States, are struggling to find police officers. So what we're doing is anything we can possibly think of to create interest and get people to consider. We are doing career fairs. We are visiting what they're called as Act 120 is the program that you have to complete to become a certified officer in Pennsylvania. So we're visiting these different academies, these Act 120 academies. We're using social media as best as we can. Anything we can do to get out there. But again, we talked about earlier, that touch point. Even if you could just kind of get the ability to have hands-on interaction with individuals to make them see what your organization represents. That's what we're trying to do. We partner with our municipal partners in Montgomery County to host consortium examinations. That has been beneficial, but it's definitely we're not seeing the number of people that you'd like to see. I liken this, and I say this, years ago, you would start a hiring process and you would get the candidates that you needed. Now hiring has become an ongoing process. When you begin a hiring process, you run through, beginning to end, and there's a high likelihood that you're going to have to start one right then and there until you find someone to fill the roles. So it's difficult, but again, you have to hold true to creating a positive culture and empowering the officers with the tools that they need and making them know that they're making a difference in your community and they're valued. And that's probably one of the biggest things that you can do to keep them here.
It's interesting you mentioned social media. What I noticed in some of the recent interviews I've sat in on is they're interviewing us as much as we are them. A number of candidates have referenced our social media pages, our LinkedIn presence. We're fortunate that we have a public information officer on scene. We have a really robust IT department on scene. But I think that's a change too, that gone are the days of the candidate just sat there and hoped that they would get chosen here. Now they're looking, like you said, culture is important.
Right. It really is. And again, unfortunately, policing sometimes lags when it comes to technology. I think we are starting to law enforcement is fully starting to understand the power of social media and when it comes to recruiting people. The problem you run into is municipalities don't really have the financial ability to utilize social media at its greatest potential. I mean, if you really want to do something, you want to be on Instagram so that it's popping on, someone's Instagram page, and because it's meeting certain criteria or whatever they would call that. So it's hard. It really is hard. But again, it's, we as collectively, not only in our department, but collectively as the chiefs in Montgomery County, we're trying to pivot and use that to our advantage. But it is a struggle. We'll do anything we can to get people in the door to talk to us about a profession, a position within the organization. But one thing we cannot do is we cannot drop the standards by which we exist. We are not going to lower those standards because, again, we are one of the few professions that are given the autonomy to take an individual's life, and that is something that should be followed. And, you do not want to bring people in for the sake of filling positions when the individuals may not be worthy to be an officer. And I think we've seen that collectively on several different occasions throughout the past few years. I mean, most recently in Illinois. Honestly, I don't think that individual should ever had a badge in the first place. But, unfortunately, you see departments that sometimes they're cutting corners to fill roles. And that's something we need to be very careful and mindful of in our profession.
Bill, how important is culture in firefighting? Given that we have volunteer departments, we have an overwhelming number of volunteer departments, in the Commonwealth that's large. But we also now have totally departments that are career, some that are hybrid like us. So where does culture fit into all this?
Yeah, culture is the essential element that makes us function, right? What is our culture as a combination department? And it's tough. It's tough to create and foster a culture, especially I think in our department being combination. We strive to be a culture of safety. We strive to be a culture of community risk reduction. And we're ambassadors for community risk reduction, but creating a culture within our department is one of my main challenges. How do I make everyone feel that they belong, and how do we have everybody involved feel that they have some ownership? So we have this combination department where the career staff is there to support the volunteers, and it really takes away from that ownership of the true volunteer company that I grew up in, where, okay, we need a roof. You go out and you do a boot drop, right? Or you need the truck breaks and everybody comes together to fix the truck. It's now we don't have that ownership. So trying to find other ways to create that culture. And like the chief said, we can always find the people, but are they the right people? And in a profession, whether you're a volunteer or a career member where you could lose your life, you want those people to be the right people. You just don't want heartbeats on a fire truck. You want people who are trained and they're going to not get themselves hurt or get their partner hurt, right? So we have done a lot to create that culture. The formal name of our department is the Department of Fire Services, and some of the members call it the Department of Fire Services Training and Certification, because I really believe that training is the cornerstone of everything we do. Training within our department, training with our mutual aid companies, because you're less likely to not like someone right? So if we can get out there and create a culture of training and knowing the people that are in our department and the people that are responding with us on calls, that's really important. And I think there was a time in our department where the culture was toxic because there was not the right mix of people, and there was a diverse schism between the volunteers and the careers. And I get it. There's going to be rivalries, right? There's going to be rivalries between career staff and volunteers. There's rivalries between people who respond to one of our station and respond to the other station. There's rivalries between our fire police officers, but I want to keep those healthy, and I want to keep that competition healthy. But we also want to make sure we have a standard, like the chief said, where that everybody coming through our door, if you're going to be a firefighter, this is the standard you have to meet, because at the end, we want you to go home. Everybody goes home, and you're part of that link. And that's the culture that we really want to, we really want to work towards.
Shane, I was going to use the word challenge, that you walked into a challenging environment, but I think if I'm honest, I feel like you walked into a hot mess in some areas. So how is the culture, what have you done to cultivate the culture that you want VMSC to embrace and represent, not only internally, but to the public?
Well, I think it's a couple things, right? I think that it's up to the leadership to walk the walk, right? Talk the talk. So I think it starts at the top of setting a standard and an expectation. I think a clear focus of advocacy for what we do and the patients that we need to serve. And I think it's important that an agency represents the makeup of its community, right? So I joke about that most fire service, EMS service was all pale and male, right? So that we had to really make it a real earnest effort at saying that doesn't work anymore, right? So, it starts with trust, transparency, showing the people. You can tell people all day long about something, but until you actually roll up your sleeves and demonstrate, hey, I'm willing to do the same things that you are. And I think that's where you really build it. And I think my first few months here, it was certainly an uphill battle, and, trying to, get people to buy into what we were doing. And some people are no longer with the organization because they just couldn't make that kind of transition, right? So, but ultimately, we have fostered a real collaborative, open kind of culture in our organization. And I think it's, as Scott was saying there, it's not the money, it's a short term, right? You can offer people a lot of money. If people are going to want to work there, they, especially generationally, these newer generations don't put the emphasis on the dollar that, our generations did and still do, right? They want to be happy. They want to know they're fulfilling something important. They want to be recognized, that their time is valuable, and they're willing to give it. But it's got to be worthwhile to them. So I think embracing those kind of things make us have really improved our culture. And, I think outwardly, when you have a good culture, then you deliver a good product. And I think we're seeing that.
I agree. And we were talking about social media earlier. I love the posts that VMSC puts on LinkedIn where they highlight a staff person.
Yeah.
And not just like, here's Joe Smith, he's a paramedic, he's been with us this many years, but their route to get there.
Right.
Because everybody has a different story. And it's one thing to say, I care about my staff, our staff matters. It's another to showcase them, to the public. So kudos on that.
Yeah, I think it is. And then there's that saying, it's not the destination, it's a journey. And that's what we try to, when we identify an employee that we want to kind of spotlight, it's not where they are, it's where they came from, to highlight that journey, because we all have a great story to tell about how we ended up where we are. And that's kind of where we want to try to focus that attention to.
So I want to close out, Scott, I'm going to start with you. Future of police in this area. I mean, I could talk to you nationally and, but for the benefit of the people who are going to take the time to listen to this, I want to talk about specifically, not just Montgomery Township, but our region, southeastern Pennsylvania even. What do you see in the next 5 to 10 years if you had a crystal ball?
Good question. I think law enforcement will continue in their forward efforts. I mean, in 2014, the president fostered a commission to look at law enforcement.
That the one that Chief Ramsey was involved with?
Correct. And there were what they called their different pillars. There were pillars that they really recommended that law enforcement leaders really look to the future to try and at least foster those and instill them in their organizations. Building that idea of trust within the community. Making sure you have proper oversight of the organization itself. Embracing technology, emphasizing training, and addressing issues of mental health and wellness, not only with the community that we serve, but being mindful that we have to be aware of the people that are in our organizations. We are seeing, I've been in law enforcement a long time, as have my peers in their professions, and the older generations have found ways to, arguably buried some of the trauma that they may have seen. And I think the newer generation of officers, they're better than us in dealing with those things. They don't bury them down. They find ways, and sometimes they need guidance and help to kind of navigate those things. And we have to be mindful as leaders of professionals in public safety, that we have to be willing to help them, as well as those that we serve, to navigate some of the things that we unfortunately have to see in our profession. I mean, it can be tragic. It can be really detrimental to your mental health at points in times. And it's important that we, embrace not only that, but the other pillars that we discussed. So I think we're doing a good job of it collectively in southeastern Pennsylvania and the municipalities around us. And I think that we'll only continue to do that. I mean, the bar has been raised after some mistakes have been made by law enforcement in our country, and I think that the officers in the departments that are really locked in on doing the right thing are moving in the right direction. So,
Bill, I'm passing the crystal ball to you now. Fire services. Let's talk, our area, North Penn region, Southeastern Pennsylvania. What do you think? Are we going to see more? I'll tee it up. Are we going to see more departments going to a hybrid model like we are? Are we going to see, do you think we're going to see a rise in volunteerism again, or do you think those days are behind us?
I think over the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be status quo. I don't really see any significant changes to the way we currently do business. I'm super fortunate to work for a township that is committed to public safety and has the funds to make the fire department a reality. The fire service is going to take a real change to make the things that should happen, right? It's going to take a large change from politicians and communities to have to change the way we do business. Because right now, people call 911 and a fire truck shows up, and that's what they, that's good enough. We don't have any expectation other than the fire truck shows up. We don't expect how many people are on the fire truck, how they're trained, what the response time is. The push now is just to make sure that the fire truck shows up. So, in my world, I would be looking at regionalization. I think that would be the way to do it. In the grandiose bill would want a countywide system. I think that there's a way to do it and embrace the combination fire department, embrace volunteers. Maybe the volunteers will want to become career members. Maybe they just want to be volunteers. Doesn't matter. True combination department like a lot of other states do it. But our Commonwealth is, smallest government minded, and with the fire service, there would be a lot of people would have to give up a lot for a county or regional type fire service to happen. And you talk about how would we pay for a regional or county service? Well, there's so much duplication of resources and efforts, that we could. Not everybody would need 4 engines at $1 million. Not everybody would need a ladder truck at $1.5 million. We could pool our volunteers. So even though Montgomery has 40 and Lansdale has 50, do we pool them so that we're all covering each other, or do we just have an authority? Do we share our combination fire departments? Do we run trucks with Montgomery Township firefighters and Hatfield Township firefighters like they're doing in the western part of the state? There's a lot of cool things that we could do to be progressive. And there's a lot of models that are already been created that have done all the work. Just look at Virginia and Maryland and all the places where our people leave to go be career firefighters at. We lose a lot of our volunteers. We talked about housing, but we've also lost a lot of volunteers to Baltimore City, Baltimore County. We just lost one of our volunteers to Myrtle Beach, to Reading, to Allentown. So we're raising volunteers for city department too, when we could keep those people at home in our department. But I wish it would change, and I know it needs more than Bill's wish for things to change. But until our political leaders get behind some sort of change in the culture, I don't know what else we could do to push it along.
As I was listening to you, I was thinking emergency services is the one area where change won't come organically. It usually comes because something has happened that has now brought people to the table to say, whoa, we need to reevaluate this, or somebody at the top is starting to have, a realization of what we're facing and has the courage to come to the table and say, this is what we need to do. I know in the past, we've seen regional police departments form, and then for different reasons, they either dissolve or people break away because there are costs inherent to emergency services. We don't make money in emergency services, but it's still the key thing that we're tasked with to provide. So, I think Bill's wish that might be a good start.
I just, we Pennsylvania loses the most firefighters a year in death, right? We have the highest line of duty rate in the country, right? But we also allow anybody to get on a fire truck. Like, there has to be some type of link, right? There has to be some causation there. So I understand, and listen, I don't I'm fortunate. Grew up in Lower Central Bucks, and now I'm in Montgomery County, where there's money put behind fire departments. I don't know the struggles that they have in the central or the western part of the state, right? But I don't want to ever get to a point where we're going to put anybody on a fire truck to go to battle. Like my job is to make sure that every one of our people come home, that they do the best job they can, that they have the training that they get, but that they come home. That's what we've been tasked to do. Like the chief said, there's the national police movement, there's the national fire movement, right? The 16 life safety initiatives. Everybody comes home. The only way I can do that is if the people are trained to come home. So we really need to look at it all comes down to cost benefit analysis, right? What is a risk? What is the life of a volunteer firefighter worth to your municipality? Is it okay to put a person on that truck? Are they expendable? They're not trained. They don't know how the equipment works, but we got them on the truck. They're a volunteer. Are they expendable? And no, nobody's expendable. But is that the culture we've created statewide? I don't know.
Shane, you're the last one with the crystal ball. So, having come from a different state and now here, and you're seeing what's going on at the county level. You've obviously seen, I see the VMSC monthly reports, the communities you're covering, to cover for other ambulances that either aren't getting trucks out or are busy in a neighboring community that can't get a truck out. So what do you think?
I think that we're going to see more of the same, which is a dwindling of EMS systems. There's been many systems that have closed over the last 10 years in the Commonwealth and across our country. We're seeing increased ambulance deserts across our Commonwealth, particularly in the central part of the state. And we're seeing them all over the country, where it's going to take a while for an ambulance to get there. I think that's going to continue. I think we'll see an expansion of EMS capabilities and desires within the community, with hospitals, home, more people, not, overcrowded ERs. So I think EMS is going to be the natural kind of stopgap to all right, how do we let them fix it, right? But obviously, if they don't provide the funding to do that, it's just another burden. So I think we'll see that the dirty R word, regionalization amongst fire EMS agencies. I think whether that's because systems just close because they can't find the funding or support, or there's a sentinel event type situation that rises a concern within a community. We see this all the time across the country. There'll be some kind of incident that happens and suddenly there's a referendum to fund something, right? Yep, we've been beating the drum for 2 years before that sentinel event happened. So, I think we're getting obviously more attention because of the ambulance closures, and we're seeing more concerted effort by EMS leaders to get out in front of this and get their local communities involved. And it is not popular. Nobody wants to see the EMS chief or the fire chief or the police chief standing in front of the council because they know what they want. They're looking for funding and so forth. But, I would shift a little bit what Bill said. What's a life worth? And I think, what is a life worth? When we look at funding something, when I look at, hey, our cardiac arrest survival rates are about 13% better than they are anywhere in the Commonwealth. Well, that's only a handful of people, but those are people. What is that worth? So I think you'll see more increased reliance on government support and subsidy to get the services where they are. But I also think we're at a really great place to see really interesting and innovative enhancements clinically that are going to mean safer communities. People are going to survive what was unsurvivable before, like with blood. We're hoping to roll that out in the next 2 months. And so it's exciting for me to see what's happening. I'm a little scared, when we say, well, at the funding and, we're doing all these things without any means for reimbursement, but it's the right thing to do. So I think we're going to see a lot of changes and more of the same. I don't know that it ever really gets to where it needs to be in our lifetimes, just being honest, because there's so many silos between the fire EMS folks, for the private industry EMS folks, and profit EMS, but it's a very divided system. And getting everybody to sing from the same sheet of music is sometimes really difficult to do.
Well, I want to thank you all for your time. I know you're very busy, but I think it was a really important conversation, especially for the people who we serve, to understand this better, to understand the challenges you're facing, and to understand your commitment to the professions that you've chosen. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the We Are Montgomery Township podcast. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast and follow Montgomery Township on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at MontTWP. Our display name is Montgomery Township, PA. Until next time, we are Montgomery Township.